of all, I'd like to start by asking you, how have been the last 10 months for you personally and professionally?
That's a great question. I do think I feel extremely blessed that from a family perspective and from an inner circle friendship perspective, we have been not experiencing any type of sickness, any type of health issues. And consequently, I feel extremely blessed. There has certainly been a change to the lifestyle in not being physically in the office environment so much. And I certainly, and Victoria can attest to that for sure, was a very frequent flyer. So yes, I do miss the interaction for sure. There is certainly a part of me who wants to be out there as quickly as possible again and travel the world once again. But I also have to see I'm mesmerized as to how quickly the world adapted and reacted to the crisis in terms of really finding creative ways to bring people together. Technology assisting in that significantly, like what we're doing right now here with Zoom, for example, right? This is now widely acknowledged, and it's going to shape significantly how we think about talent acquisition, teamwork, interaction with customers. I mean, to a certain extent, it's a blessing for me because I can do 5 or 10 customer meetings a day without having to travel, right? It's of course, I mean, it will not replace the human interaction, but to a certain extent, it's interesting how certain technologies have been available, but just now they're really seeing the full appreciation of the extent what they can do. So from that perspective, I do think it's going to be interesting to see how we all get out of this crisis, not just from a health perspective, but what kind of changed attitude we have towards technology, how our attitude changed to travel and other type of pieces. So it's been fascinating, I would say.
Okay, you're right. You know, being healthy is the biggest blessing we can have, and technology we've used to do every aspect of our life. Technology immersion has gone up, whether it's education, whether it's content, whether it's running your business or your office. So you're right, we've started to use creative tools even better than we used to in terms of technology. Now let me ask, clearly in India, and you know, while you have a global perspective because of your role, but and you know India well, let me tell you, in India, from a Corona standpoint, we started to do better, at least for now, and we hope that the trend continues. So traffic is back to normal. Offices have started to open. Cinema halls have opened. So, you know, some of the behaviors we exhibited during Corona were because of compulsion. Now we have a choice, either to meet someone face to face or to be able to do it through Zoom or any other video platform, right?
Yes, correct.
So in your opinion, Juergen, what are the behaviors that will stay and what are the behaviors that will go away?
I do think we're going to have a very changed attitude towards how do we attract talent. What I mean with that is that whereas in the past, potentially, I might have been a mindset of, okay, I want to hire very close to my office location, to my headquarter location. I think it has taught us now over a very painful period, but very educational period, that technology can be a great catalyst to bring teams together, regardless as to where they reside. So I do think we're going to see a profound pattern as to, and you see it with corporations, right? For example, moving out of high-cost locations into lower-cost locations, for example, corporations making it completely flexible for employees to never ever come back in an office environment. So I do think you're going to see policy changes being applied. And to a certain extent, the crisis has brought the world closer together, I would say. We're fighting same type of challenges, and I think it has humanized a lot of interactions as well. I mean, the other type of piece that I do think what's going to be different is like the study that we did. I do think the digital appreciation for certain type of features has been accelerated significantly. What I mean with that is You can look at it from a consumer behavior, like digital payments have been advanced significantly, right? No one wanted to touch cash, for example, or take myself as an example. When I go to a store, especially in the pandemic context, I'm trying to gravitate to stores where I can do touchless transactions, where I don't have to do payment with physical cash, because there is this element of, oh my God, who touched this thing before potentially, right? The same thing is true how corporations need to think about, I'm going to go quickly into other aspects than the study, but I do think supply chain has risen to the forefront of conversations, always having a plan. So I do think we're going to see supply chain compositions change significantly, how corporations think about planning cycles and software supporting them there. But now, more coming back to the study, I do think it has accelerated how technology can help addressing both business challenges and consumer behavior. This is why we did this study, right? We really wanted to make sure, how has the attitude between consumers and business professionals towards letting, for example, an algorithm manage finances already progressed? And while we always had a hunch that AI is going to be a decisive corporate investment, it was very interesting to see on the consumer side that a lot of folks trust an algorithm more than themselves to manage finances. I do think that is a big statement, right? Because that would suggest that distinct decisions are more prone in the future being done by an algorithm, by a machine, than a human. And oftentimes this is sparking a fear element, right? Oh my God, AI is going to take my job away. We actually see it slightly different. This is not going to happen overnight. At this point in time, it's an augmentation of the human skill set, an unbiased decision-making assistance that you can do smarter and faster insights, both as a consumer or a business professional. And it will help you to rid yourself of some of the mundanity of decision-making, of research, and really elevate your career potential, quite frank, your productivity potential to a very different level. And over time, let's just say the next 5 years, certain job functions are going to evolve. They have to evolve. We already are seeing that when we talk to young millennials coming out of a CPA, an MBA type of class, they want to work for corporations who are decisively invested into those type of technologies, because they don't want to be dragged down in crunching Excel, in doing all those other type of things. They want to be augmented with those capabilities, that they can focus on being the next disruptor in the market, developing a new business model, new payment terms, value add. So I do think the liberation aspect actually, right, is massive if done correctly. So we think AI ML is not the villain here, quite the contrary. I do think this is going to be a progression where the trust fabric is constantly elevated, and consequently we're going to see an evolution in consumer patterns and corporate patterns in how certain financial transactions are going to be done.
Absolutely, Juergen. At this point, let me ask you, what are the three, you in some way alluded to these findings, but what are the top three findings of the survey from the Indian market, and how would you compare them with the similar trends in other markets in JPAC?
I'm not sure if we have contrasted it to JPAC, Victoria. Maybe we might have to follow it up between India and JPAC. So I think I have the Indian numbers here for sure.
Yep.
So I can contrast them, Anouk, and Shomya towards the global type of things. But at this point in time, so we can certainly provide the clarity for the other regions that you can contrast it a little better. What we did see on the highest level is that India, for example, is very advanced in the endorsement of those new technologies, both on the consumer side as well as in the corporate side, right? So I do think that's fascinating if you compare that, for example, to the global type of standards, where other countries like my home country, Germany, for example, Switzerland and other type of things, right, potentially take a much, much more conservative, regulated type of approach, and consequently adoption is lagging other type of things, right? So you definitely see a vast spread of this type of extension of trust in both applications on the consumer side, but also in the corporate side. What was pretty interesting as well is that the statement is pretty interesting. We asked this question, right? I mean, that 70%, this is the global study, 73% of business leaders would trust the robot over themselves to execute finance-related tasks. That's already a high number. But in India, for example, it was 88%, right? So this is just very interesting to see that even if we compare our own decision-making to an algorithm, India is certainly here much, much more trusting than even the global high standard, right? I find that very interesting, for example. The other type of pieces that we're seeing is that there is a very high correlation between the use cases where individuals and business professionals would see the applicability of machine learning and algorithms in finance. What rises to the top globally here, as well as in India, is fraudulent spend detection, for example, in corporate settings, invoice automation, creation, and best cost benefit analysis. Whereas the consumer side, we see similar patterns as well. It's also, I mean, I think it's proven that an algorithm is likely much, much smarter in detecting a anomaly, right, on your credit card than what you might be able to catch up as a consumer. Or what we're also seeing is that, and that's oftentimes in the fintech space and in other type of things, right, that consumers are gravitating towards new offerings that helps them to optimize their spend patterns. I do think where it gets a little bit more iffy potentially is if you're saying, okay, I trust all my savings and want to invest into the stock market. Do I do that based on an algorithm? Would I put a financial consultant in head of that? Do I trust myself more than that? So I do think that's where we see interesting patterns. We're still seeing that life, or let's just say the important decisions in life, right? Like buying a house, planning for retirement. Those are things where you appreciate the help, the unbiased help of decision making, but you're still likely going to be gravitating towards either bouncing that off with your fiance, with your husband, your wife, your significant other, or a financial advisors, where even the best insight might not be the final judgment point here, right? But it is very interesting to see how fast it has progressed, how open both individuals and business leaders are to using them. And what surprised us even more is how decisively corporations are really moving into that space. And on the consumer side, I do think it's going to be very interesting to observe how the use cases are evolved. It's certainly not going to be the last time we're going to do this study. We want to see what other use cases evolve over time, but also how we are interacting with financial advisors, for example, right? For us, as a technology company, it certainly validates where we investing into, right? From a development perspective in helping customers cope with those technologies, apply them for business outcomes. But it is still quite mesmerizing as to how 2020 specifically has shaped and accelerated this type of endorsement, actually.
Absolutely. Just one question, Juergen.
Yeah.
India adoption of technology is quite advanced, but some may say Indians in trusting robots, has it gone to that level when it comes to personal finance? So kind of explain this a little bit more. Give us a context. You've already given us some context. Why do you think the numbers are high in India?
I do think that India, the way I've gotten to know it, has always been a very progressive, technology endorsive type of thing, right? Also stipulated at times, incented significantly, and it's been a hotspot for technology ever since I know it. So from that perspective, I do think that this likely has shaped. This is not to say that if I contrast it to more conservative type of countries, potentially such as Europe-based type of things, they are not potentially equally technology affiliate, but oftentimes there is more regulations potentially. There is, it takes a longer time potentially to settle in. Unionization of type of things. So there are a lot of things that can play into the adoption pattern changes from that perspective. I mean, if I take this one study point that you also have for yourself, but I mean, you mentioned the financial advisor type of thing, right? So 67% of business leaders in India believe that robots will replace finance professionals in the next 5 years. That's a pretty high number, right? So that is for something where I think India is certainly very advanced in trusting into those type of technologies, right? So I'm fascinated, and I'm curious to see how this develops over time, right? Because it's a snapshot, this study, right? And I do think the more often we do this type of study, the more patterns we're going to be recognizing, right?
Absolutely. And my last question before Soumya comes in, you know, the fintech ecosystem is really making sure that we become inclusive in terms of how financial products are distributed, consumed. Also, we are a very under-penetrated market in most financial products. So fintech is helping kind of democratize penetration and grow it. So how do you think the adoption of SaaS-based technology product is aiding the fintech revolution?
I do think, I'll answer it a little bit more generic and then I'll go into SaaS specifically. I do think cloud in general is a great catalyst for technology adoption. And then you're spot on. I do think software as a service specifically as a distinct category of cloud-based software, right, has a lot of advantages that you can consume as you go, that you can get very cost-effective ways to innovation. So this is why we also, from an investment perspective, are banking a lion's share of our investments into software as a service type of things, but then of course cater to any type of hybrid scenarios and multi-cloud type of scenarios. But SaaS specifically, I do think is a great catalyst, because with that, innovation can be just consumed the swiftest way. We feel very strongly that software as a service has a lot of benefits to deliver business value, where the vendor of choice that you're partnering with has the distinct opportunity to ship use cases, alter use cases, do A/B testing. You can learn a lot in a real SaaS model as to how consumption really takes place, which business use cases that you ship are really being used through telemetry, right? And consequently, we feel that SaaS specifically is a great catalyst to this trend, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Let me leave it to Soumya, and all the best, Juergen.
Likewise.
The kind of tools you are bringing in, the kind of consciousness you're bringing with this study and data, which will then hopefully help individuals and corporates make better decisions, especially individuals make better decisions on personal finance using technology tools and SaaS tools. It augurs well for their lives. So congratulations and thank you for doing it. I'm sure we'll track the study year on year to know how the adoption of robots and technology-based tools is growing. So thank you so much, Juergen. Over to my colleague Soumya Sehgal.
And I look forward to the continued partnership here and the continued conversation, because I think we all learn from each other.
Absolutely, Juergen. And we hope to see you in India sometime. While we'll continue to use technology tools for our work and interaction, we don't mind having a cup of coffee when you're in India next. So all the best.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Look forward to more interactions. Thank you.
Likewise.
It was also observed in the study that financial anxiety and stress among the business leaders increased by 186%,
Yeah.
and sadness grew by 116%. So how can these business leaders pull themselves out of this situation? So you being one of the experts in the industry and a core person handling this study, how can these leaders get themselves out of the situation?
That's a fantastic and fascinating question. I do think a lot of it has to do with decisiveness on technology bets. What I mean with that is that by all means, COVID has acted as an accelerant, right? In reassessing your technical readiness. And I often have conversations with business leaders where either they express relief or regret. What I mean with that is relief if they have been acting a little bit either through luck or foresight in doing the right technology investments and can consequently maneuver the crisis a little bit more elegantly, meaning they have the planning tools in place, they have remote work offerings, they have already tested certain type of technology advances towards their benefit and now are benefiting more, can come potentially swifter out of the crisis, and then regret, where they say, oh, I wish we had more decisively invested into those type of technologies to help us through the crisis. Now, it would be arrogant to suggest that technology by itself solves all of the problem, but what we found in conversations is that, and we just had this conversation, technologies as a software as a service partnership with a technology provider can reap huge benefits right now, right? Because we, for example, observed more go-lives than what we had before, and we did it remotely. We're in the same boat as other corporations, right? For us, it was a blessing that you cannot go to the office, but technology allows you to do remote work. For the first time, closing our books remotely, a massive challenge, right, for a lot of corporations. But we just announced that we have been having the fastest financial close in the S&P 500 out of all corporations. So I do think sometimes it is decisiveness, it is the decisive endorsing of new technologies to really help, that hopefully can ease some of the concerns that, well, we don't know where the pandemic will unfold and when it finally will end. Hopefully, at least you see relief. You can trust on technology helping you and automate some of the mundanity. Having more trust in your decisions, quite frank, as well, because you have more data potentially to apply to, and just having more comfort potentially that you can maneuver out of the crisis, both personally and corporate-wise, in a better shape.
Awesome. And can we say that the role of finance teams and financial advisors will never be the same?
I do think over the next 5 years, I would say this statement becomes more true. I certainly see the skill set massively shifting in regards to just very different skills coming to the forefront of what you bring into your corporate life and how you privately think about financial decisions. So I would absolutely commit to saying, yes, the roles are going to evolve. It's going to be impossible to say, is that in a 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year type of thing, but we took a little safer stance and said over the next 5 years for sure, we're going to see a very altered skill set and not a replacement at this point in time. I wouldn't go that far. And I certainly don't want to steer any angst. Quite the contrary, we do think the augmentation piece is really the way to go for right now, and just be endorsive of the help that modern technology can bring.
Thank you, Juergen. That was all for today. Thank you so much for your time. I do have a lot of takeaways from this session. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it, Soumya.